Hello, welcome to today's episode of Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Andy Ulseth. Welcome, Andy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Good timing, because you're going to be playing Minnehaha Falls tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yeah.
What time will that be?
So I think we're hitting at like 7. Laura Hugo, who's a really talented singer-songwriter locally, and her band are starting. So they're going to play, I think, for a half hour, and then my full band will be hitting after that. So music at 7 will probably be 7:30, 7:45.
Laura's a great friend of mine and one of my favorite
awesome.
songwriters.
Oh, cool.
So,
Yeah.
Cool. I will try and make it tomorrow.
Oh, sweet. Yeah. Awesome.
Also on the horizon, August 21st.
Yeah.
You're going to be recording a live album.
Yeah.
Where is that going to be happening?
That's the goal. It's at the 318 in Excelsior.
Okay.
Which is one of my favorite sort of listening rooms. It's kind of my home venue because I grew up right out there. But we're going to be recording it with the intention of putting it out in the future. I'm having another kid in October, so I kind of want something that I can like release while I take time off. That's kind of the idea.
Lovely.
So, but
yeah,
that's a show that I'm really excited to get people in to listen to it and kind of put on the show that I've been doing for a number of years and capture it. So that that energy can be felt as people listen to my music at home.
Absolutely.
That's the goal. Yeah.
How much overlap is there between the songs on the record that we're about to be diving into today and the live album that you'll be recording?
Quite a bit. Quite a bit. It's more along the lines of I think that playing live, there's a different energy in performance. And sometimes looking people in the eyes while I'm singing the lyrics, I feel like I can sort of communicate differently, and that gives me a different energy as I sing and play.
Yes.
So I'm just excited to try and capture that as I tend to do it on stage. That'll be fun. And then when people come up to me at shows in the future and say, do you have anything I could buy? Or do you have a merch table? Which I do. I'll have something that's more definitively in line with what they had just experienced seeing me live. That's kind of my idea.
Yes.
But it's also, again, to have something that I can kind of release in the near future while I'm taking a little bit of time off to have another kid.
Good plan.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah.
There is some really beautiful string arrangements and brass parts on this record.
Thank you.
Courtesy of Green and Soren.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will they be playing with you live?
So they don't. Neither of them play with me live. When we play live, I do have a really wonderful musician I found and have become friends with named Leo Johnson, who plays the trombone and actually uses like a harmonizer pedal. So what you're hearing on stage, it sounds in various parts, it sounds like horn parts, like a horn section or horn arrangements, harmonizing horn parts. But it's really a single player playing trombone and duplicating a lot of those parts. Some of the parts on stage are duplicated with keys. But by and large, I didn't want to be putting on a show with these songs that was more like just like guitar, bass, drums, because to your point, they are kind of lush. And that was part of sort of the aesthetic that I wanted to put forward. Was having something that was a little bit more orchestrated, a bit more lush, a little less minimalist. I wanted something that was a little bit sweeter sounding overall. So I do try and recreate that. We do try and recreate that as best we can. And I think we do a pretty good job with the current setup, but unfortunately they won't be joining me. Those two won't be there.
So how did the ensemble of musicians that are playing on this record come about? And the same question for the ensemble that you play with and that we'll be hearing in the future on a live record.
Yeah.
How did those two different collectives kind of come to be?
So most of the people are generally the same. When I record, this album I recorded in my house, I can sing, I can play the guitar, I can string together a bass line, I can like make keys sound decent on a recording. And so like much of that was me. The drums, I can't really play drums in a way that like sounds good. So my friend Matt Sheeby, who has been playing with me for a long time, and he plays with me live and he plays on the record. He honestly recorded the drums for this record in like 4 hours in my spare bedroom at my house. Like it was a very like, and I didn't really know that was weird at the time, but like in telling people that now, it's very much like, you guys did what? Like it's a whole record's worth of drums in like 4 hours. So he's a wonderful musician and a wonderful friend. Eric Carlson is handling the bass duties with me right now, and Eric has been playing with me for probably almost 15 years.
Yeah.
I met him right out of high school. What's that?
Yeah, you highlighted on the Bandcamp that he really made the songs pop.
Yeah.
So what was did he have a special role kind of as a collaborator in making the record?
So he is an ace musician in virtually every way. Keys, guitar, bass. He's a good singer. I mean, he's just exceptional. But he's also a very talented and very experienced recording and mixing engineer. So I had recorded these songs. I went to my friend Eric and said, what do I do now? And he said, bring them over, we'll look at them. And so he and I spent a number of months going through the tracks, and he mixed them, essentially. He mixed them, mastered them, made them sound less like they were recorded in a spare bedroom. And he just did a wonderful job. He's got this know-how and this acumen with knowing what knobs to turn and when, that is exemplified in his musicianship, but also, I mean, if you consider the fact that this album was recorded in such an amateur way and how good it sounds, I think, large in part due to Eric's efforts. So he's a very dear friend of mine, and just a really, really, really professional contributor to a number of projects, including mine. Molly Ulseth, who sings on it, is my wife. She has a lovely voice and is an excellent harmonist. And when her and I met, she wasn't a singer. But again, I was recording at home one time, and she was in the other room, and I was like, do you want to come try this? And she's like, yeah. So again, that was like, 12 or 13 years ago, and she's been in every recording I've ever put out.
Wow, she's quite prominent.
Quite prominent. She's all over it, in addition to Emily Moorbacher, also sings on it, who you might know. She's in a band called Val Sun.
Yes, I love Val Sun.
Yeah, so Emily's a good friend of mine, and I just wanted to get their two voices kind of together, and so they did a lot of like the choral, like sweeping oohs and ahs together. Green Bazard is a wonderful violinist, who just was like very intuitively picking up the parts that I would sort of say, like, what if we did this? And she would be like, cool, did it. We did that in like a couple hours, and that's a byproduct of her skills. Soren Trygestad is a local guy who brought some ideas to the table, some of like the trumpet leads, trumpet solo stuff. And I really believe that some of those moments that Soren brought up to the level of drama that you're hearing, like he sort of like
powerful.
Made things more captivating in some moments. So I think I am not the world's best guitar player. I'm not the world's best key player. I'm not the world's best singer, but I do believe that I have a good ability of putting together sounds that worked, and I'm proud of the team that worked on this, because I think we ended up with a really great product that I'm happy to put my name on.
Absolutely.
Thanks to a lot of other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love the image that you have, again, on the Bandcamp of sending. You said that you were grateful to be able to float these songs off on a raft to the center of a lake, and then what happens next is you pull an arrow from a quiver, light its end with a burning torch, and then eventually launch the flaming arrow onto the raft as it floats away.
Yeah.
So and then you highlight that it's not a funerary commemoration, but one of joy, hope, and change. But I think it's really interesting to start with that image, because the record is about change and evolution, songs of love, confusion, empathy, and evolution. It's called How We've Changed. Yeah. And so there is this kind of phoenix-like celebration of letting something that's been created burn. I just love that as you send it out, to be something that others engage with.
Yeah.
That there is this image of kind of like a sacrifice, and of it being kind of destroyed in some way.
Yeah.
Could you expand a bit more on that image?
So I'm sure you're familiar with the term like "kill your darlings." I don't know who said that initially, but it's this sort of philosophy that in self-editing and in determining what is the best path forward with like a growth as an artist or as a creator, you should be willing to get rid of the art that is your favorite, because you'll always be able to create something as good or better if you maintain your practices and you believe that you are going to continue to evolve. You will do so. I wrote that because I pictured myself having carried these songs around in my head for the 2 years since it had been finished.
Yes.
And
the 2018, 2019 is when it kind of all comes together.
Exactly. And and then in the preceding years, some of these songs were written in like 2011.
Like the opening track.
Yeah, exactly. And they just sort of live in your head until you put them out into the world, right? And so I thought of this sort of like, I don't even know if it's a cliche. It's just sort of like a known thing about like the traditional Viking funeral that you see in movies or whatever, where they float the honored dead person out on a raft and then fire an arrow that's lit on fire, and kind of it's like this honorary thing. And I sort of loved that image with regards to like, okay, these songs aren't just in my head anymore. There's something that is out there that anybody can go online and listen to them now, or buy the record and listen to it. And there was something sort of like, cool, now I don't have to take care of them anymore. It's sort of like, now they're not just my thing that I have to remember to think about or maintain or do work for. And I was really happy to put them out into the world in a place where I felt like if people came to me and said, what does your music sound like? I could give them the latest iteration of my art. And that felt freeing. Instead of being like, well, there's stuff out there that you can listen to, but I don't know if it's indicative of where I'm at now as an artist. It's very freeing and celebratory to me, especially after waiting so long to release these, to like release them in a way that feels commemorative.
Totally, yes. It also seems like sending that boat out kind of opens a space where you can now do something entirely new. I mean, you're writing at least a song a week.
Currently,
we both are.
Yeah, yes,
in
we
the
are.
same songwriting challenge.
Yeah.
I like that for one of your recent posts in that you were highlighting that your kind of challenge for yourself with this round of the Song a Week Writers Challenge is to kind of break out of some habits of songwriting that you'd fallen into. And so could you expand a little bit more about that in relation to having sent these songs out on the boat and kind of set fire to the boat?
I'm excited to answer this question. So totally, what I just said a second ago about how, I always want to have stuff available for people to listen to that I feel is the most representative of where I'm at. And like, I had for the longest time held on to these songs that when I had completed them, felt like, well, this is where I'm at right now. I'm excited for people to hear this. In the meantime, I've written a lot of stuff. And when I was in the challenge last summer, I wrote 10 songs that I was really proud of and really happy about, that I felt I felt a definite maturation between where this record is versus the stuff that I was writing last summer. And so I think that I now feel like, even though this is a brand new record, it's kind of an old record in a way. And so I'm really excited because I've made space now to be able to focus on these other songs that I created last summer and continue to create this summer that I'm really excited about, that I feel like are an even more indicative set of songs of what I can do and where I am and what I'm interested in.
Yes.
Pertaining to what you said about breaking some habits and kind of trying to get away from those. Last summer, my batch of songs, I got into the habits of sort of being like, I singing in falsetto and kind of creating these like big soaring choruses that were sort of grand, and then resolving into like a key change out of the second chorus into a bridge that was like kind of the emotional climax of the song. and then ultimately remaining in the key change and ending the song in kind of a quiet way. So like it's a structure of songwriting that felt very good to me and felt very like, wow, this feels very like academically correct in how I assembled it, and I felt like it was very good of me to sort of live by that practice week after week.
It's pristine and well constructed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like if what I was trying to do is like if you took like a college professor whose expertise was songwriting,
Yes.
to look at it and think that it was like a structurally perfect piece. And I really wanted to try, and not that I thought every song was perfect, but I wanted to check certain boxes that I thought would make it captivating, that I thought would make it emotional or nostalgic or whatever, interesting. And I just found myself getting in the habit of like needing a bridge, of needing a fourth verse or a third verse. Like, and it just started to feel like, why am I doing this? Because I feel like I have to. Whereas last week in the songwriting challenge, I wanted to write a song with 2 chords throughout the entire thing.
Yes.
And like I felt like there's no bridge, there's no real like big climax to it, but I think I still wanted to try and make it captivating in some way. So like these are the types of restrictions I wanted to put on myself this year, that I ultimately believe will help me sort of expand my palette and horizons.
Yes, exactly. I really love that song.
Oh, thank you.
Heavier Crowns.
Yes.
It doesn't, I think because of the complexity and consistency of the lyrical content and the melody, it really doesn't, you're not consciously thinking this is just 2 chords.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was exactly the goal. I mean, I have favorite songs. I mean, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac is by and large 2 chords.
Yes.
And no one would think that. They might throw a 3rd chord in there every once in a while, but like by and large, it's the 2 chords back and forth, and then they switch order for the chorus. And like, I believe that there are ways to make that captivating. You know, it's like you create the foundation of the cake and then you frost it in various ways.
Yeah.
And so I want the frosting of my songs to be, you know, homemade frosting rather than, you know, kind of like the cheap whatever fondant you can get at like the end cap at a grocery store. Like I want there to be something that's a little bit more it's just a little bit heavier, a little bit denser, a little bit more rewarding. And that's, again, not me trying to say that everything that I do is of that echelon, but I want to try to be as good as I can be because I think that that's rewarding for me.
Yes.
And I hope that people like to listen to it. But yes, that's exactly the song I was talking about.
Absolutely. So it seems like last summer was, if I'm understanding correctly, kind of the peak of really paying close attention to songwriting form.
Yeah.
And challenging yourself to, you know, be cognizant of the tried and tested practices, the wisdom of many songwriters, and giving yourself the challenge to construct something that's informed by those best songwriting practices.
Almost like writing with a checklist.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, do I feel, are there 2 choruses at least? Okay. Is there a 3rd chorus, and does that make it better? Yes, check. Does it have like a 3rd, like a C part, which would be like a nice like bridge that I feel like sort of is the most emotionally eruptive part of the song? Like, check. Do the bridges kind of pull you through the story in a way that feels natural and maybe makes you laugh, or you think this line is clever, or you think that this line is sad, or it's particularly pulling on your heartstrings or whatever? Like, I felt like I was writing with a checklist, and which is cool. I think I stretched myself in ways doing that last summer, and this summer feels like I am trying to forgo those practices to allow myself to to not feel obligated to make art by a checklist.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Yeah.
So now with this collection of songs that you're
Yeah.
composing presently, there's a loosening and kind of allowing and inviting whatever's going to emerge without being kind of prescribed by form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say so. Yeah.
How would you describe what's happening with the songs that we're discussing today on this record then, prior to the experiments with form last summer?
Totally. So this batch that's on the record was a time when I was really striving to write with intention in my lyrics and to advance my ability to convey big sort of sweeping emotions
Yes.
via melody. So I wanted to write songs that weren't vague for the sake of being vague. They were something that was a little bit more, oh, there's a vision here. You're listening to it. You get an idea as the listener in your head of what this is about. But I'm adding to that. I'm not being too like abstract or too cute with things. I really wanted every song to feel like some sort of real thing, that people could picture and follow along with and get an idea as to what it was about.
Yes.
My biggest thing here was self-editing. Like I wanted to make sure that if something wasn't getting across, I would cut it and feel good about it. And I feel like what's there from a songwriting perspective, from structure and melody and lyrics, I feel is pretty concise.
Yes.
And I feel that people listening to it will understand what the song is about. And that's what felt like the goal to me that made those songs sort of all hang together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that in Highways That Vibrate, the opening track, it seems like there's this invitation for the listener to see things and hear things, to kind of fine-tune their perception. So lyrics that make me, bring that to mind for me, for example, the tones that only lonely travelers know. So we have this figure of the lonely traveler, and this lonely traveler knows certain tones. It's possible to know these tones. And the highways that vibrate call on us to see in a certain way. So, and that's like right next, that's the next lyric.
Yeah.
And then a little bit later, the humming of the thoroughfares are the bassiest notes that are barely there. So there are these multiple moments where it's possible, if we commit to discerning, to noticing things.
Yeah.
There's this all of these rich textures.
Yeah, I think like mindfulness is something that I think about a lot. I'm not the best at practicing it, but I like to remind myself to try.
Yeah.
And, knowing one's environment or taking the time to try and know one's environment. That song in particular was, I used to live pretty close to like 35W that goes through the city. And at night I could hear the sound of the highway. And it got to I kind of had this like vision one night that every highway would hum at its own frequency. Some unknown frequency, and it's white noise. We don't even think about it, but like 35W might hum at a different frequency than 394 or 494 or 169 or whatever. And so it's just like it's a certain characteristic of that particular roadway that no one thinks about, but we all hear it.
Right.
And then so when these roads intersect, do they create chords? Is there discordance? And how do they sing with each other? And sort of, you're absolutely right when I sort of am inviting people to take in various textures, sounds, things in music, but also visually, and in their neighborhoods, and kind of like finding ways to receive the things that we might not necessarily be looking at or looking for in our daily lives.
Yes.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think that was kind of the exact idea of that song, and putting it together as this sort of like psychedelic thing about about the roads and things of that nature. And then, that song was sort of written also with the idea in mind that like our infrastructure in our cities is crumbling in a lot of places, and it isn't receiving the funding that that is needed. So we have bridge collapses and things of that nature, and so highways that are vibrating, and sort of visualizing these structures, these man-made structures that create these tones, but aren't really necessarily being maintained all that well.
Right, the cities aren't recognizing the moans of the viola-like roads.
Yeah.
The dynamics are great in that opening song. There's a bit of piano at the beginning, and then it's kind of stripped down for once the vocal comes in, there's you and your guitar, but then we get to the various different instrumentation is introduced. I just wondered whether you could reflect a bit on the dynamics of the song and the way in which the different instrumentation is showcased alongside the call to mindfulness.
I think that's interesting because that song doesn't have choruses in like the traditional sense. It has these sort of extended instrumental breaks that feel sort of big and celebratory, and like in practice are probably the choruses, but they're instrumental. And I think if you're taking like a kind of like a critical viewpoint of it, it's worth noting that the loudest, most sort of impactful orally moments of the song are not. There's no words.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, to me, there's a little bit of a connection between asking people to listen to the world around us, and not necessarily and not using words to make them do that. That was sort of, I guess, the idea.
The words get out the way. The words have done their job.
I'm telling the story in the verses, and then the choruses are sort of like, now do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think like that's sort of the kind of like turning up the volume on the sounds that people might not necessarily be listening to or listening for.
Totally, I love that. So two final features of this first song.
Yeah.
The fact that it's cyclical, so by the end, we are back with the final lyric, I breathe it in to feed my longing lungs.
Yeah.
And then that lyric in particular, there's the presence of the body as well. And these lungs are longing. The lungs want something that, depending on how mindful we are, might align and might not align with what we're kind of consciously kind of striving for. So what's the significance of, especially with this, combining those two things, the song beginning and ending with this verse where the breathing is feeding these lungs that want something. The lungs are longing. Yeah,
so in terms of this
song structure.
The structure of it and kind of coming back, it's basically this first verse gets repeated to end out the song. And I did that because I wanted to remind the listener that this is not a song about an actual journey. The song starts with the narrator sitting in bed or lying in bed, trying to fall to sleep, hearing the sound outside, and sort of realizing that this is, and it's me, I was the person that experienced this. But then at the end of the song, I haven't gone on a journey. I haven't gone out to experience these things. I'm still laying in bed, still focusing on my breath, still focusing on, what is immediately in front of me. I think like when I think about the longing lungs, I'm more thinking about we just need to be breathing, and then putting that in perspective of mindfulness exercises wherein we're focusing on the breath. So the longing aspect of it is just noting the fact that we as human beings have organs that require oxygen being forced through them. Not so much that they're yearning for it, but they require it. And then putting that sort of in the frame of, focusing on the breath as one's laying there trying to fall to sleep, and kind of sharpening and honing one's senses as they're taking note of the world around them.
Yeah.